to his role as Director of Practical Effects. Prior to LAIKA, all these credits include the fantastic Mr. Fox and Tim Burton's The Corpse Bride. He received his BA in Sculpture from Chelsea College of Art and his MA in Animation from Royal College of Art, London. He's been with LAIKA since 2007 and was nominated for a VFX Award, Academy Award for his work on Kubo and the Two Strings. Please welcome to the stage, Oliver Jones! Director and writer Chris Butler. Chris Butler was co-director on LAIKA's Paranorman, for which he also wrote the original screenplay. Missing Link marked his return both as a writer and director. Aside from developing his own projects, he was head of story and writer on Kubo and the Two Strings, story supervisor for Coraline. Prior to LAIKA, he has decades worth of experience designing and storyboarding on numerous high-profile animated projects, including Tim Burton's Corpse Bride. His work has been nominated for an Academy Award, a BAFTA, several Emmys, and the first GLAAD Award nomination for an animated feature. Please welcome to the stage Chris Butler and a very special guest. Woo!
I was going to say, I feel like we need to introduce Link, aka Susan. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. This is so exciting and such a special opportunity to get to talk to the creators of this tremendously amazing film. Did everybody love it? Yeah! I assume so, because it's incredible. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit, and then I think we're going to do some audience questions. So, I'm going to kick us off with a little bit of gushing. I just have to say, you know, and I think everybody will agree that Missing Link, this is really, it's really a masterpiece, and I don't say that just to, like, you know, make you feel good. It really is. It was mind blowing, and I think one of the really exciting things about the film. Oh, hello. The screen is falling on us. There was just so much storytelling in every single inch of the film. You know, like it was just in everything. It was in the writing, it was in the characters, it was in everything was so cinematic. There was like the color story, the lighting, everything was telling the story in its own way. And I think that it was very special and very unique for that reason. The layers really came through. And I think it really kind of exceeded what I think a lot of people expect of stop motion. You know, I think it took it to this new level that was it was just, like, even if you don't like watch that much stop animation, you were like, oh my gosh, like this is stop animation. Like, it was really arresting. It was so beautiful. And so I think, like, a big question that I have is that, like, in a day and age now where everything is so digital, and that's how a lot of animations are made digitally, what really drew you to this story and to want to do this in stop motion? Like, what draws you to do it in this way, in this form?
I have had a love of stop motion for quite a while, and I think that's the thing with these movies. There is this real passion for them, and I think what it comes down to is real light on real objects, being able to see all those fine bits there and texture on fabric, and it kind of takes you back to playing with toys or imagining your toys coming to life. I think that's part of the magic of stop motion, is that you want to feel like you can reach into the screen and touch those things. It's real, and it is. There is something magic about that. And it's also something that I think CG is still pursuing, which is that kind of chaos of realism. But for me, the reason to make this particular story in stop motion was, well, first, it was very different from stuff that we'd done before at the studio. A lot of stop motion could be quite dark and creepy, and I think we were like, yeah, no, I don't think we've done that. Let's do something a bit different. Let's do something bright and bold and colourful, and just show what we can do with this medium. And of course, it's not just stop motion. There is an awful lot of digital stuff that goes into this as well. And in terms of the story, there's always one thing in the stuff that I write that suggests stop motion. With Paranorman, it was zombies, so you know, like inanimate objects coming to life, it felt right to puppets. With this, I think there's like this grand tradition of stop motion apes. You know, there's King Kong, there's Mighty Joe Young. You know, it all goes back to the very first stop motion films or stop motion effects in films. So there was something a little bit kind of nostalgic about realizing this guy in stop motion.
That's just so cool. Ollie, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to add?
I think what's unique about this show is, in terms of it is stop motion and does kind of does rely on a lot of digital assets as well, but in a way it's Chris's sensibility as a designer and as a story artist, that actually comes through in the way that this character was designed and the way it was and actually performs. There's a lot more, there's like 2D sensibilities in there as well, so even though it's stop motion, it doesn't just rely on the old stop motion kind of ideas. It kind of, I feel like the movie and the characters really just stretch it as well as it being, you know, predominantly, you know, a lot of it is outdoors as well. We shy away from in stop motion traditionally. There's a lot of things about this kind of squash and stretch and things like that Chris kind of really put into this production.
That's so cool.
Me as well.
Yep. And you know, I think
Did you hear what we were saying?
I was like, I think it was Gary, but just in case.
They're like,
Well, you know, I think that the thing that you were saying, you know, about like this being, you know, part of this sort of like legacy of stop motion. I love that it harkens back to something that's very original. I think that that's just so special. It just, once again, it just adds to the layers that of detail and everything that you put in, like just even from the like inception of it. I think that's so cool. And you know, since we're in the Pacific Northwest and this is a Sasquatch, this feels very appropriate, you know, for us to be talking about Link and about the film. And I feel like when you watch the film, like you really feel like those scenes that are in the Pacific Northwest. Like when Lionel gets the letter and he's like, oh, it's in Washington. Like I immediately perked up. Like I was so excited. I was like, they're talking about us. They're talking about us. It's happening here. And so like I don't know if everybody sort of knows like how you made it like really feel that authentic, like the detail and the depth that went into making it really present in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, you know, there's so much research that goes into these movies, and particularly in this movie, the historical research. So the logging town and the woods, you know, you can get overwhelmed, I think, sometimes by all the granular details in these movies, to the extent where, you know, everything is stylized, obviously. Everything is our version of the Pacific Northwest. But the types of trees, the types of plants, they're all real. They are informed by what is around us. But you can find yourself getting a little bit carried away, where I'm like, is that flower, does that grow in Washington? And it's like, yeah, it's a movie about a talking Bigfoot. Who cares? But you do try and put as much, invest as much as you can. That research is important. If you put that amount of legwork into it, I think it follows through. I think that makes the end result so much more compelling.
It definitely feels very rich. Like I don't think that the film would have felt that way if you had sort of like, you know, not looked into the, you know, as much as you could have. I think that those are the things, that's like the undercurrent, that's the quiet backstory that people don't know goes into something. Like, why do I love this so much? Why does this feel so lush and authentic? It's because there was all of these people doing all this research, checking to see if that flower actually grew in Washington at that time. You know, I think that that's really amazing. And I think that actually flows into my next question. Like, you know, LAIKA is really known for this like level of detail, you know, but I think like in Missing Link, it's very mind-boggling, like some of the things that you're talking about. So something that, caught my eye was like the fringe and the stagecoach. I think that was something that was just like, I couldn't take my eyes off it, and I was like, I wonder if anybody else is like paying close attention to this fringe and the stagecoach.
So there's this, a great scene, which is just kind of like a talking scene. It's just a quiet moment between three characters. And so, we get designs and we get briefs from the director, and we kind of like, we start to understand what this scene is about. And, we're looking at the designs, and we just notice that at the top of the stagecoach is this hundreds of tassels. And we're like, well, if the stagecoach is like bumping along the floor, then these tassels are going to be moving. So, gently just, kind of ruminating, like, are we going to make these tassels move? Do we? And like, of course, it's the LAIKA way that, we want to be stretched. We want to find out. We want to do these things. We want to do these things that are kind of unexpected, that other studios might go, that may be a little bit too much. But we just went, all right, let's go full board into these tassels. And so we do these things for our animators called live action videos, where we kind of shoot video that can be kind of inspiration, or kind of we can work as finding out the performance. So we did the same thing with tassels. So we set up these like full-scale tassels on a rig, and we made them bounce around, and we watched them, and we studied them. We thought, how are we going to be able to break this movement down into just like some key, just kind of axes, just these really small movements. And so in the end, we're there. We've got 180 tassels that are all rigged on these little zigzag wires that are all going to these motors. And then we had blinds, and we had curtains moving. And I think in the end, that whole set is only about a foot wide, and we had about 40 motion control motors driving tassels and little doohickeys, and we thank him for this.
You see, this story comes up, and I'm like, this is just intended to guilt you.
No, but it like literally is my favorite part of the job. Is this kind of like, we get to spend some time just really studying, and it's like the hidden secret, like it's kind of like, say that it's the research that goes into it that actually becomes the fun part. It's not just the execution, and that's I think what the studio has enabled us to do.
And it's partly what makes animation. When you see good animation, that's the stuff that sticks with you. I mean, Walt Disney called it the illusion of life, and that's what it is. Having those, how many?
180.
180
He's not counting.
tassels, give or take. Having them shifting around through that scene brings that scene alive. Hopefully you look at that, and whether you notice the tassels or not, what you think is, this is a stagecoach that's rattling through the desert.
That's just so amazing. I love that like something as simple as that, in theory, was something that you spent hours studying and then making individual motors for. I mean, it's magic. It's really special.
And it's unique. I think like it is special. That whole kind of process of movement. For a stop motion studio, we have like a static world, right? So we have to breathe life into everything that moves, because if it doesn't get animated, it's just still. And so if we want, life in the trees, if we want to feel the breeze, we've got to work out how to put it there. And so that's great, and the stagecoach is a great example of that.
I love that. Well, can we dive a little bit into some technical stuff then? I think we're going to do that. Because there was a lot of technical advancements, and like you said, stretching, like you really pushed yourselves in this film. And you had said that there's like a hybrid of animations, that there's like, the digital backgrounds, and you used plexiglass in parts, and 2D and 3D. I mean, like there's so much. Out of all of doing all that together, like what were the most complicated and most rewarding things that you had to do on The Missing Link?
I come from a 2D background originally. I came into stop motion quite late, so I have love for the animated 2D image. And so for me, I think one of the areas that I enjoy the most is facial animation, because it really is a mix of all the different mediums. You have a 2D animator who does the initial animation tests to explore a character, and then you have the CG animators who have a computer model of the character. They're the ones who create all the shapes that make up the dialogue, and then that gets, I don't know how many of you have seen this before, but allow me to demonstrate. Oh yeah. I can probably shout anyway. So every single frame of this movie.
Yes!
Yeah, you see, always get some oohs and ahs.
Oh my gosh, his face came off.
It's quite upsetting, really. But every character has two halves of the face. And like I said, these are created first, they're animated in the computer, and then they're printed out with a 3D printer. We were the first studio to use a 3D printer to do this. On Coraline, the printing was only in black and white, so someone had to individually paint every face. Coraline had, I think, was it 13 freckles?
That sounds really low.
And because that's every frame, they have to match every single frame. So the freckles were, on the print, they were a little bump, so the painter knew where to paint them, so they wouldn't move around. Then on Paranorman, we first used a color printer, and we went from Coraline having 13 freckles to Neil, who had like 1,000. Because we were able to paint that in 2 dimensions and then map it onto these things. So this is what the animator does. They get this set of faces for each scene, and they plug it on. And then,
That's just amazing.
and the reason that there are the 2 halves is it increases the amount of expressions that we can have by, hundreds of thousands. I think, I always forget the numbers.
I've got the numbers.
Oh, you've got
I'm
the
gonna get the
numbers?
numbers for you. Yeah,
How many expressions?
It was, hold on, I get it.
I'm going to guess 40,000.
That's my guess.
I think we had the potential with Kubo. It might have been the Norman or Kubo had the potential for 104,000 expressions, and you think, why do you need that many? Like, who needs that many expressions? But it enables us to do the kind of acting that is very nuanced, very realistic. And I think that's ultimately what we're aiming for, is when you see this character on the big screen, you forget that it's a puppet.
I think that's exactly what, it felt like, because you took the time to make all these like little just slight changes. It was so smooth. It was like I had to keep reminding myself, this isn't CG. These are puppets. Like this is stop motion. Like, it was that incredible. And for the record, it was for Link 27,000 faces. For Lionel, 39,000, and then 13,000 for Adelina. So over 160,000 faces were created for Missing Link. That's a lot of faces.
And they all get put in boxes in a library. We call it the face library.
Yeah, kind of like pizza boxes.
Not like it looked real.
Well, this is like another kind of evolution from the stuff that we were doing on Paranorman, where the actual prints do have the depth to them. So after kind of Coraline, where we were painting, then Paranorman, where we could actually get kind of color. This color is actually going in 3 dimensions as well. So they actually can build up the color through the print, and so there you get something that is akin to like a real face, where you can kind of have layers, and it does make a huge difference when you can light something and then the light can penetrate surface, and you can kind of get like the blues underneath the skin tone.
Yeah, like Lionel's nose. Like,
Yeah.
I was just fascinated by how the
Yes.
light just like gently came through. I was like, that looks
Yeah.
like Cupid's skin. I was like,
Yeah.
are you sure this isn't real? Are you sure he's not like, that's like not like I took a real small guy, like
A really pointy nose.
with a really pointy He knows, yes, exactly. And I mean, I think that that was, you know, pretty magic. It kind of felt like Geppetto's dream, you know, like it's like, oh, like this is what like he would have wanted in Pinocchio. Like, oh no, he is a real boy, like by doing these things. I mean, Link himself is kind of a marvel. I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about like what kind of goes into the Link.
Yeah, I mean, Link is definitely the most kind of advanced puppet that we'd ever made, especially at this scale. You know, we've made like huge monsters and kind of a much smaller creatures, but this is a fairly large hero character for us, and so we wanted to put as much of, you know, our know-how that we've learned on previous movies into this, but then the design itself actually challenged us. So there is, inside we have a belly mover, which is kind of rocking up and down on a worm gear. He has a breather, which is on a lead screw that pushes in and out. He has a squash and stretch rig, so he can actually, in his walk cycles, he can actually move, his spine can actually grow and shrink, and so we can get like an exaggerated 2D performance out of him. His faces, like Chris just showed, they actually come off, but there's actually like a substructure within that kind of changes the whole envelope of the head. The neck was possibly the hardest thing to design on the whole puppet, because he has, you know, a relatively thick neck. You know, human characters, they have thin necks and big heads, and so when you get a twist, it kind of feels quite natural. This thickness is very difficult to produce, so he actually has these kind of, it's a foam with kind of big holes on the inside, kind of like a corrugation, and then he has all these kind of, almost these furries built up in petals. So when he twists, each one of those kind of urethane petals can kind of rub over each other and give us the illusion that the fur is actually going straight to the skin of the puppet. So, but I think like that was all in reaction to what is a really unique design and kind of atypical for a puppet of his size. You should talk a little bit about like your inspiration.
So, again, I come from a 2D background, so a lot of that is about silhouette and shape and, you know, graphic. And so some of my first drawings were being dubbed the hairy avocado. And there was something quite charming about them, and I kept going back to them. Now, when you're making a puppet, the want is to try and think about what will make it the most animatable. So that's shoulders, a defined neck, anything that can give you the motion that you require. Link's got none of that. He doesn't have shoulders.
Head to like
Yeah.
arm.
And it's that kind of thing that, you know, in my designs I'm like, I want that. And there's a whole army of people who leave that room hating me and crying. But it's that kind of thing that I think makes it special. And eventually we came up with this guy, and I still think he's probably, you know, the most beautiful puppet.
He's so appealing, right?
It's very cute.
Yeah,
very
he
sweet.
really is. Yeah.
And why didn't you use like fur? Just like.
Well, that's a really good question. So as we mentioned, I kind of worked on Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is, you know, that has real fur used in the making of that movie. That stuff it's called Mystery Wind. So it's during the animation process, hands get, you know, touch it thing. You know, the environment takes its toll, and it's a unique look. It's like it can be very, some people really like it, but it can be a distraction as well. And so what we really like to do at LAIKA is kind of make sure that we don't lose you. We love the process, but we don't want to lose you in the process and distract you from the story. And so this is a version of fur that's stylistic, that is also kind of enables us to kind of really work with the character and not with just the material. And maybe you talk a little bit about the actual kind of the quality of the design of the fur, because I think it comes again from the 2D.
Yeah, and the way we were going in the design was so stylized that if we made him with fur, it would feel like that would have created its own set of problems, but it also wouldn't have fit into this world. So that's a big question that you get at the start when you're starting to design these things, is like how to make sure that everything feels like it's all the same world. And if you look at like Lionel's hair or Adelina's hair, it's all got the same kind of stylization, but then suddenly you've got this guy who's covered in it. Which was a bold choice in the end, because I know there are a lot of people who are like, you can't make a hair-covered character out of silicon. We just, I don't think that can be done. But all these techniques that Ollie mentioned, we eventually got to a point. I don't think anyone watches the movie and thinks, that's a big rubber guy. You kind of go with it, because everything in that world is consistent.
Well, you did a really good job of, like you said, like that the characters were like hyper stylized, and then the settings were incredibly real. So those things together, you found this beautiful balance to where you believed it. Like, so you can have a character like Link next to, you know, like a train that's like a real train, you know, like, and that's fine.
Yes, but even to that extent, we get nothing off the peg. You know, everything is bespoke, and we have to build everything. So if there is a fork on the table, that fork will have the same rules as a character's body. And in this movie, we've got very short bodies and long limbs. So that means, of course, that the chairs that you have for these characters are kind of weirdly proportioned. And that follows through to everything. So even the train, the size of the train door, the size of the chimney stack on the train, all follow those same rules. And you don't notice it because you're not supposed to.